Hey guys, welcome back to the fanfic reread project. In this episode, we are continuing our reread of The Dark Knight Rises with a Selena chapter. Yeah. Oh boy. So I guess we should just jump right in, honestly. She woke up a lot earlier than she would have. The sky was pink outside the window. At least it looked like it'd be a nice day. She couldn't figure out why she'd woken up in the first place and was about to turn over and go back to sleep, but she heard something. She didn't know what it could have been, but it was strange. By the time she got up to the window and opened it, it was gone. Nothing but silence, until she heard Barsad moving around downstairs. So it's weird that this takes all that time to point out the fact that Selena woke up. Then the noise thing happens, because we'll learn what that noise is and we'll be like, oh, okay. But like having all of that emphasis on like, oh, she woke up earlier and then she didn't know why she was awake implies that she was woken up to hear that, when that's not what happened, as far as I can see, at least. Moving on. She went to the landing and saw him just closing the front door. What are you doing? She said down the stairs. You heard it too, he said. She shrugged. Maybe, she said, coming down the stairs. What was it? He shook his head. I don't know. I feel like I might have heard it before, but I'm not sure. She couldn't even imagine where he would have heard something like that, but then again, he might have been everywhere. So it is also weird that this noise is never described for us. So I take back what I said about us being able to realize it, but I think later some context comes in. But it is weird that it's never described, because this is clearly something that we actually already saw. And if they had just said, like, what's that noise, and described it, like, slightly, you could have been like, oh, so this is when this and this, you know? But apparently I just decided not to do that. I don't know why. The rest of the morning passed uneventfully. She wandered around during the afternoon. She'd taken back to it after all that happened. It had been exactly 3 weeks, and they were unable to make moves in any direction. Knowing that Bane could be monitoring their every move had them stuck. Now it felt like they were waiting for something, but none of them knew what. I wonder what that could be. She stopped short when a kid went flying past her. There was a guy hot on his tail. What the hell was he doing? One of them grabbed him by the back of the shirt. You steal from us, you little bastard? Wait, there's one guy. How can one of them... Okay, whatever. The kid shook his head, but the guy pried an apple from his hand. He reached back to hit the kid, but Selena grabbed his hand. You can't come in my neighborhood without asking. The little shit took... He was cut off by his arm being twisted behind his back. She shoved him out of the way, taking the apple from him. Keep it moving, asshole. The guy sulked off, holding his arm. She turned back to the kid. Don't steal from anyone you can't outrun. Now you're just gonna take it, he said. Second lesson. Never steal from those who don't have. She threw it back to him and watched him run off. A growling voice traveled down to her. Pretty generous for a thief. She looked up to find Wayne sitting in the window of the building in front of her. She cursed under her breath. Hey, she had been right. He didn't look like a guy who had gotten his back broken. Hell, he looked like he did back before all the shit with Dent. How the hell was that? Wow. So apparently, not only did turning into a whatever the fuck heal his back miraculously, but it de-aged him 5 years. What? Oh, man. You're supposed to be dead, she said to him. He smirked. Sorry to disappoint. His voice had changed back to his original one. What are you doing out here? I need your help. And why would I help you? I forgot my Selena voice until right now. Sorry. For this. He pulled something out of his pocket and threw it to her. The little thing landed in her hands. It was a USB drive. You could have revealed that when it landed in her hands. It must have been the clean slate. If she was honest, she'd completely forgotten about it. It used to be the thing she wanted the most, but after everything went to shit, she hadn't given it a second thought. She looked back up at him. You're gonna trust me with this after what I did to you? You don't want it for a tool. You want it as an escape route. You want to disappear. Disappear? She scoffed. I can't even get off this island. You'll be able to in a few days. I need you to take me to Lucius Fox. What do you need him for? He didn't answer. All right, then. Meet me where we met before in an hour and a half. He nodded. You know if they find you, he'll tear you apart, right? Who says they'll find me? She rolled her eyes. All right, you asked for it. He disappeared into the building, and she started back toward the house. She ended up being there a bit early. She took out the 2 mercenaries that were guarding it easily. Okay, I know that we read this and we know where they met before, but she could still say the tunnel. Just to give us a sense of actual place instead of, I'm going to be there a bit early. She took out the 2 mercenaries guarding the tunnel easily. Done. Like, she even had the decency not to kill them. He didn't show up too much later, peering from the same alleyway he had before. This is just a giant echo. Nice work, he said, eyeing the guys on the ground. Why is the tunnel blocked off, he asked. A hand on the barbed wire crisscrossed over the entrance. So no one gets out. That's nothing compared to the entrances further uptown, though. He must not care about this one as much. He tilted his head to the side, like he didn't understand. Do you even know what's going on? That's why I need to see Fox. She turned and headed past the tunnel towards the yard. You got a lot of catching up to do. And that's the end of that chapter. Oh, that is the shortest chapter that has been in this part of the story so far. Wow. That was fine. Literally, this chapter just feels like it is there to be a giant echo back to literally everything we've ever seen ever. So, because this, again, still doesn't make it super clear, this chapter begins right after the moment when Bruce gets out of the mansion. The thing that Selena heard in the morning was him. I don't know why the chapter played so coy with that, because, like, dramatic irony of us knowing, like, but whatever. Anyway, like I was saying, this chapter really does just echo a lot of stuff. Clearly there was important stuff happening. It's like a important connector bit, but we get the actual echo that was in the movie where Selena attacks the guy. I think this is the thing, she attacks him the same way that she attacked the guy who was threatening Jen at the apartment, so that's kind of like an important echo showing that Selena is something or other. It's slightly early in the morning, so my brain's not really processing super well, but like clearly that echo is written into the movie. But then you also have the sorry to disappoint echo, which is from fucking Batman Begins. All right, you asked for it, which is from earlier in the story. You have a lot of catching up to do as an echo, I think, to the last chapter. It's so much just like echoing. And the thing is, as the story starts to end, at least the stories that I've written, having echoes back to like the beginning of the story makes sense. But this chapter kind of overdoes it. There's like so many. Hey guys, editing Frankie here just to finish this thought. So on top of the fact that this chapter squeezes a ton of echoes in with each other, not all of them make sense in context. And this is the thing about these like echoes back to the beginning of the story or to previous installments of said story. They're there not just because like the story is ending or just for the sake of like being there. It's usually because the characters are in a similar situation that they were in earlier, but they're doing something differently. So the echo is there to emphasize that fact. And not all of these echoes do that. The one exception to that is when Selena twists that guy's arm behind his back. It's the same action done to protect an innocent from a thing, to show that Selena still has that like sort of, what is an honest streak or like a good streak in her, something like that. That is meant to just emphasize something about the character, and her not doing it differently is the point. But usually it's like what I said before. But anyway, let's get back to my explanation here. Like I said, though, it is natural for a story to start having callbacks to its beginning as it starts to end. I think if you're willing to read through all 14 episodes of Speak of the Devil, once you hit about like episode 12, I think, and go down in the last few episodes, you do start to see a lot of echoes back to the first like half of the season. Because, you know, things are starting to tie up, so you get a lot of like dramatic echoes and stuff like that. But that's 3 episodes. This is 1 chapter. So, but anyway, let's move on to the next chapter, which is Bruce once again. The bunker was just the way he remembered. Gray concrete and white lights like the R&D basement, but smaller. There was a small cot in the corner, and it seemed like Fox had pulled all of the wall panels and drawers out. The man himself was sitting at the computer. He did a double take when the elevator came down. Having fun, Bruce said to him. You picked a hell of a time to go on vacation, Fox said, rising from his seat. Almost lost my head uptown, so I came here. Decided to work on a few things, just in case. I need to have a word with you, Bruce said, crossing his arms over his chest. Fox didn't respond, but he nodded. Care to explain? God. Oh, God, this chapter. He looked down. I'll admit, it wasn't one of my better mistakes. Bruce cocked his head to the side. Mistake? He moved to the desk and opened a drawer. He pulled out a small vial, identical to the one that he'd received the last time he saw. Okay, pronoun game. You can't start the thing with he and then refer to another character as he in the same sentence. Don't. Anyway, this is the one I was supposed to give you. You didn't have them labeled. It's not the kind of thing you would mix up with something else, usually. Again, not one of my better mistakes. How long did it take? 4 months. Fox's brow furrowed. That's a bit longer than it should have been. I got my back broken. I see, Fox said, nodding. But it barely slowed you down. Bruce shrugged. What am I? Oh, God. Oh, God, I just remembered that scene. And I think it's like Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets where Harry is like sitting outside and it's snowing and he's next to Hedwig. I think this is in the movie. I don't know if this is in the actual book, but he's like, "What am I, Hedwig? Who am I?" If only Bruce had a Hedwig right now. Also, can we talk about the fact that apparently Fox supposedly got this mixed up with the medicine that he was going to give Bruce for his life? Again, this entire thing just makes no sense. You can't just give people medicine. And it starts there and it just keeps going and it makes less and less sense the more you look at it. I don't understand why I decided to do it this way. Why did it have to be Fox that did this? That's what I don't get. What's the significance of that? Maybe this chapter will enlighten me. So let's keep going. What am I? A theory-anthrope, a very new one at that. New. Created artificially, for lack of a better word, maybe 10 years ago, based off of a bat. He smiled. There were only about 9 others, besides yourself. Why? Whatever. Anything I need to worry about? You're susceptible to any of the diseases the other 2 can get. That shouldn't give you too much trouble, though. You'll be... Oh, God, this part... I'm so sorry, guys. You'll be attracted to vampires. Not attracted, though. You'll enjoy their company more than a werewolf, that's all. Bruce tilted his head again. He shrugged. He had a sense of humor. Wow. That explained why he'd been so happy to see Alfred then. What? See, that's another thing that, again, I understand that. And this actually does play into the story, and it was meant to play in the other stuff later down the line, so... I don't like it, but at least there was a reason. But it's like, that's why I was so happy to see Alfred. Not because it's fucking Alfred, though. Like, it's Alfred. Then he remembered Bane. Why does it end the first sentence with then in the beginning, the other one with then? Was he one too? That was the only way he could think to explain that odd incident before he fell into his coma. Oh, that got written out of the chapter where he fell into his coma. I forget exactly what happened, but yeah, this moment was not in there anymore in the edited version. That feeling of unease started to creep up on him again, but he forced it out. He had bigger things to worry about at the moment. What did I miss while I was gone? Fox whistled. Everything. Bane's got the city on lockdown. He's executed anyone who made more than 6 figures that he could find, anyway. And there are something like 3,000 cops trapped in the sewers because they refused to kill for him. My personal favorite, however, is that he had Dr. Pavlov turn the core of the reactor into a bomb. Bruce's eyes widened. He wasn't dead? He is now, Fox said gravely. But the bomb should have gone off by now. He was only using it for intimidation. He still has the trucks rolling around like it's out there, but he disarmed it, put it back in the reactor, and turned the reactor on since half the town lost power after the storm. But here's the best part. He did it himself. You told us someone would learn what Pavlov worked out. You were righter than you knew. That changed things. He had already underestimated Bane's physical power, but now he had his mental power to factor in as well. Do you know what you're going to do? I'm going to stop him. It'll be all-out war. Then, the day after tomorrow, we're going to war. Why not tomorrow? You'll be stronger. Bruce looked down. You don't trust yourself. I've got heavy hands, Lucius. If something were to happen, he's a powerhouse, Bruce, and you might have an advantage now. That's not an opportunity you should give up. He sat back down at the desk, but in the end, I can't tell you what to do. He had a point. He knew better than to think Bane was human, and he'd experienced what he can do when he wasn't trying to kill him. He didn't know if he'd be so kind this time around. On the other hand, while he was getting better with himself, he didn't have full control. He would not kill Bane, not on purpose or by mistake. In any event, Fox said, reaching into the drawer again, I had these made for you when I realized what happened. He handed Bruce a pair of gloves that looked like they'd fit his hands perfectly in his other form. Maybe you'll get some use out of them later. Bruce nodded and started back for the elevator. He stopped when he got a thought. Lucius, he turned back, you wouldn't do something like this on purpose, would you? He looked up. Do you want me to be honest? Bruce's jaw tightened. I thought about it, but I didn't. I kicked myself in the ass when I realized what I did. I love this city, but not enough to betray your trust like that. I guess it doesn't matter now, though. No, it does matter, Bruce said, turning back towards the elevator again. It does. Well, that's kind of a poignant moment. But that's the end of the chapter. So, I mean, this chapter, it's clear what this chapter is about. It's about, like, updating both Bruce and the audience to what actually is going on with him. So, for what it is fine. I think of all of the chapters that we've read so far, I actually like this one the most. And I mean this of all of the chapters that we've read of the unedited version. This wasn't bad. It has most of the same problems that the other ones have. Like the pronoun game issue was really bad in this chapter. But I think because it's short, sweet, and it's to the point, the exposition doesn't take super long by being in that, like, same conversational format that, like, that John chapter had that we read when we first got into the unedited chapters. It's very straightforward, and I think that super helps. And then that moment at the end, I don't really know the significance of it, except to kind of prove that, like, Fox is still the person that we thought he was. But I think it still is very impactful, though. So even, like, outside of that, it still does work. Yeah, this chapter wasn't terrible. So now we move on to a John chapter. This is the first John chapter we've seen in a while. John was usually the first out of bed in the mornings, but for some reason she had severely overslept. When she finally woke, the sun was so high in the sky her room was shaded. The spot next to her wasn't even lukewarm. Rose was long gone. She didn't remember staying up very late last night or anything like that, until she did. They'd gone through the bottles of wine Foley had managed to bring with him. It could have been worse, she thought. She could have been hungover. She finally rolled out of bed and threw on some clothes. I'm sorry, they went through bottles of wine? How is she not hungover? Gee, what kind of wine was it? Jesus Christ. She came downstairs to find everyone awake except for Rose, who dozed off in the chair. I guess, I'm not going to just say the chair, because there are some John chapters. Like I said, things were different in this version of the story, so the layout of the room that they're in probably was described in a chapter that got edited later on, so I don't know. She woke up when John squeezed in next to her. Why? Gordon and Foley were lounging on... Oh, that's why. Foley and Gordon were lounging on the couch, both looking a bit tired. What the hell happened to you, kid? Foley axed her through a cigarette. She shrugged. It could have been worse, she repeated out loud. They all looked up at the sound of a knock on the door. Foley was the one who answered it. Selena walked in right past him. Foley had started to close the door when Jen and Barsad showed up as well. He didn't see them outside. Okay, why were you walking so fast? Jen asked her, looking winded. Selena ignored her. Guess what? She looked like she was excited, but at the same time, she looked like she was trying to hide it. Oh, the bars. John actually sat up. She'd never seen her get excited about anything. What's up? She asked her. He's back. Who? Gordon said back. The Batman. Everyone seemed to wake up then. Okay, so I kind of wanted to wait till the end of the chapter to talk about this, but one thing you'll notice with John's chapters, and I think we should just say this now, is the fact that John's chapters tend not to convey a lot of character stuff from here on out. That is because originally, for some godforsaken reason, John's character arc basically ended after the chapter where Rose got out of the sewers. Basically, John had that whole arc of trying to understand the Batman, and then for some reason, I just decided to tie it up neatly right there. So then, this is part of the reason why John doesn't have as many chapters going into the rest of the occupation. She sort of had a realization like, oh, this is why the Batman's here, and then that's it. Which I thought when I'm rewriting it, and I still do think that's kind of a waste, because there were a lot of other problems that John had. So having her just have a nice clean, oh, okay, I understand now why they tricked all the people and lied. And then she's just fine with it. She never, like, works through any of that stuff with Gordon on the page. It's just a little bit, like, suspect. But anyway, I just wanted to let you guys know that if you wonder why John's chapters are kind of, like, just conveying events from here on out. Maybe there will be some character stuff that I forgot about, but I'm not super certain. So anyway, let's get back to this. How? Rose said, asking the question on everyone's minds. She looked at Barsad. I thought you said he was dead. I thought he was, but you said Vane had trouble seeing the... Oh, fuck, I don't remember how to say it, but you know, Ethereanthropes. He stopped, eyes widening. He got a contemplative look on his face and perched on the arm of the couch, muttering to himself in Russian. Oh, fun. What the hell is a therianthrope? Foley asked, ashing his cigarette on the door frame. That's a Selena line, but I just realized that you said Bane had trouble seeing the whatevers. That's a Selena line. He didn't say that to anyone else, because if if he had, Foley would know what he was talking about or remember it at least. I should have put a dialogue tag on that because it looks like Rose said it. Werewolves and junk, Jen said to him. But what does that have to do with the Batman? And how do you know he's back? She asked Selena. I saw him when I was out. Like, I actually spoke to him. But how did he get back on the island? Rose asked her. Jen was the one who answered. He's the goddamn Batman. Oh no. Gordon, who looked absolutely shell-shocked the whole time, finally spoke. It's Arkham Asylum. That place has a ton of dirty little secrets. He looked up. I would know. But what's werewolves got to do with the Batman? John asked. I don't know. My cat acted weird around him. Barsad's the one that mentioned it to me, Selena told her. Your cat met the Batman? At the same moment that John asked, Jen slapped her hand over her mouth. Oh, what? Nothing, she said, sitting on the stairs. Selena gave her a weird look as well. Your cat met the Batman. I don't know why. Every time I read that line, it's like one of the funniest things in this book. It's so dumb, though. Barsad finally spoke up. Selena, that sound we heard this morning. What about it? It was him. Selena looked at him. That didn't sound like a wolf. He's not a werewolf. He's something else entirely. I just don't know what. But how the hell would Bane miss that? John asked. I don't know, Barsad said. He might have overlooked something. Hot damn. Oh, God. Hot damn, Foley said, sitting on the couch again. We might be able to make a move now. They all murmured in agreement. But we don't know what he's going to do, though, Jen added after a moment. Just watch for the sign, Gordon said, rising from the couch. They all watched as he moved into the kitchen. Watch for a sign. And that's the end of that chapter. So literally that chapter just exists to show everyone else learning that the Batman's back, which is fine, honestly. They need to learn it too, and having them learn off page, I don't know about that. It's fine. It's not bad. I do think that the weird stuff with them getting all drunk the previous night, I kind of wonder what the point of that was. At the same time, I could see a sort of situation where maybe it's meant to symbolize, quote unquote, symbolize, like the fact that the characters, because they know that at this point they kind of can't do anything, so they're just kind of like trying to live their best lives by getting pissy drunk on wine that Foley, for some reason, smuggled out of his house after being chased out by mobs, that totally makes sense, doesn't it? But yeah, that chapter was all right. It has that conversational quality from that other John chapter, the last John chapter that we actually read, that I kind of don't like. It makes it really hard to convey information concisely, but because this chapter, I think they're really only talking about like a few things, instead of it being like the giant rolls of exposition that Barsad had to give back in that other John chapter, it doesn't bother me as much here. So yeah. So now we move back to another Bruce chapter. Oh, good God. He woke to grass and flowers, bright red and green. He rolled over on his back to find a canopy of branches above him, the sun high in the sky behind the leaves. He barely remembered anything from last night except that he'd gotten antsy when he was in the bed. That's what had happened the last time he'd fallen asleep outside, he remembered now. Oh, so in the chapter, if you guys remember back in the first part of the story, when Bruce goes to the Batcave after Alfred says that he's leaving him, and then he goes outside, originally he apparently fell asleep out there, but that was different in the edited version, because I was like, why does he keep falling asleep outside? That's silly. So that's what that's referencing. He put his shirt back on and got to his feet. He hoped he wasn't developing a habit. Why was he outside without his shirt on? What the fuck? I don't understand why he's titties out in the backyard because he's a bat now. Like, that's weird. Anyway, the cave welcomed him with its darkness. He found himself not wanting to go upstairs immediately. He just found the place so much more comforting now. The rocks were pleasantly warm under his feet as he moved across them. He forced himself toward the elevator. There was nothing to do down there, at least not yet, anyway. He washed himself, lounging in the bath for a while after he did, and then found himself laying down for a nap, even though he'd only been woke for an hour and a half. Yes, that is actually the way that's written. He'd only been woke. Like, I think that's only notable because there is not a single space in this story outside of certain characters' dialogue where AAVE has been used, which is African American Vernacular English. You may know it as Ebonics, but I don't think that's the proper name for it, so I would tell you not to use that unless you're actually a black person. But literally, nowhere else in the story outside, or any of the stories outside of maybe character dialogue, and even there, I'm not entirely sure, have we seen that, and then suddenly the inner monologue is like, he only been woke for like 2 minutes. Like, what? Even so, he pulled all the shades and crawled under his covers. He woke with a start, searingly bright sunlight burning his eyes. He hissed and pulled the covers over his head. There was silence afterward while he rubbed at his eyes. He peeked out of the covers again to find Alfred staring back at him, perplexed. "Sorry," he said to him sheepishly. Alfred just nodded and sat his tray on the nightstand. "I made lunch." Okay, it's funny that we established in the other chapter that Alfred is apparently a vampire, but he just walks into the room in the middle of the day and, like, pulls open the shades and expects Bruce not to act like that. He should know better. Anyway, "Thank you," Bruce said quietly. He pulled himself up and reached for his food. Alfred moved for the door. "Where are you going?" "I'll be right back," he said amusedly. Bruce nodded. He needed to get a hold on that as well. Oh, God. Oh boy, this story gives me so much secondhand embarrassment for the choices. I have some hashtag thoughts about some of the choices that I made in this story, but I'm trying to save them until the end because I don't want to stop in the middle of a chapter and lay out something that applies to the entire story. So, let's keep moving. Alfred returned with a glass in his hand and sat on the bed beside him. "Is that blood?" Bruce asked him. The smell of copper tinged the air. He nodded as he took a sip. "I already ate," he told him. "You eat regular food?" He felt silly asking, but he still knew next to nothing about these things. Alfred nodded again. "I'd starve if I didn't," he said with a chuckle. "I only drink once a month." "It's not... Oh, human?" "No," he said as he shook his head. "It all tastes the same anyway." He handed Bruce his glass to sit on the table. Bruce laid his head on his shoulder as he began to rub his back. Good Lord. I mean, it makes sense. It's fucking Alfred. But do you guys see again what I mean with the callbacks? This entire thing is a giant callback to Batman Begins. Particularly the scene where, I think it was after Bruce's first night out, but instead of hissing, he's like, "The bats are nocturnal," and then he like rolls over. Yeah, this entire thing. There are so many callbacks right now. This is kind of ridiculous though. Usually it's like a line, or like I said before, like a dramatic echo. But this entire scene is like a callback to Batman Begins from the setting down to what's actually happening. Hey guys, Editing Frankie here again. Since we're talking about this again, the problem isn't necessarily how much callback there is in this scene. It's whether the callback makes sense. And unlike some of the callbacks in that Selena chapter, the first time we talked about this reference totally makes sense because Bruce is in a similar situation, but whereas before he was dealing with being Batman for the first time, and this time he's dealing with being a werebat for the first time. So having a callback to that specific chapter totally makes sense. It's not weird. Yes, I understand maybe I was overwhelmed by how much of a callback there is, but I think that in this instance, a whole scene callback totally makes sense. So let's get back to it. "Master Wayne, when I left, you were worried about me. You don't have to apologize." "I do, because I was wrong." Bruce looked up at him. He looked down. Alfred looked down. "I found the letter that Miss Dawes left for you. Forgive me." "It's fine. She didn't seal it anyway." Well, that wouldn't have mattered because Bruce read it, so it wasn't sealed anyway, but whatever. He nodded. "I know, but I'm not sure I understand. I thought the Batman was just a symbol." And we're going to talk about this now. "I thought he was too," Bruce said to him. "It turns out I was wrong as well. I mean, for the people, he is a symbol. I still want that, for them to know that they don't have to be like the Joker or Bane or whoever else might come around." He chuckled. "But for me, it's different." "He's part of you?" Bruce shook his head. "He is me." "God," he said with a laugh that sounds so cheesy. "The suit and I are one." Oh, come on. I had to have done that as a conscious, like, reference or, like, call forward to Iron Man. I hate it. I hate it. But it makes sense. Oh my God. Okay, they both laughed then. Yeah, me too. But it's true, you know? I can't stop. I only did before because I was a wanted criminal. He looked down at his hands, his claws blending with the black in his comforter. "At least now I don't have to." Alfred nodded his head, but remained silent for a moment. Bruce looked up at him. "You'll never get married, then?" Bruce looked down himself and then took a breath. "It was never going to happen, Alfred. I mean, I had thought about it too, when Rachel was still alive. I thought that's what I wanted, but I wasn't in love with Rachel. I wanted to be in love with Rachel. I thought I was in love with Rachel, but I wasn't. I've never been in love with anyone, really." Alfred nodded again, considering all this. I'd always thought that maybe you hadn't found the right person. He finally looked at him, but it seems there never was a right person. Bruce nodded. I mean, if there was, I would have married Tony ages ago. They both laughed again. When will you go back? Alfred asked him once it was quiet again. Tomorrow. He looked down at his hands again. I told Fox I didn't trust myself, but now I don't know. I keep breaking things. It'd take a lot to break him, from what I've seen. Bruce nodded in agreement. I know. How will you get him to go? I don't know yet. He smirked. I'll drag him out if I have to, though. He spent the rest of the day downstairs, checking and rechecking his supplies, and then wandering around the caves like he used to. They really did seem never-ending, and with his new abilities, he was able to see so much more than he had before. He ended up high on the wall at one point. The tunnels were all empty, save for the one the big bats hung around, but he assumed that in the winter they'd all be filled with bats. Yeah, probably. He didn't go back outside until after the sun had gone down. The air had cooled, and a soft breeze let their leaves rustle softly. He turned his eyes toward the gentle breeze, gentle is a word. He turned his eyes toward the sky as soon as he stepped foot out there. The moon hung there, heavy and full. He'd been feeling its effects all day, but seeing it was something else. He didn't feel relaxed and tired like he had the last time. Seeing the moon made him feel energized and wired. Oh, bars. He needed to go. He turned back for the cave. He couldn't wait for tomorrow. He needed to start tonight. And that's the end of that chapter. So this is kind of like the big chapter for Bruce, because this is a chapter where every part of his character arc comes together. And we finally get to talk about, like, the end point of all of this stuff. So we learn, like, oh, you know, Batman is more of me than I thought he was. He's not just a costume. And the whole thing with, like, Rachel and the getting married bit. And I will say that I actually think, even looking past all of the problems that I have had with this story, with The Dark Knight Rises, with Batman Begins, Bruce's character arc is pretty well done for what it is. I do wish there had been more in Batman Begins done with it, because his arc doesn't really get kickstarted until like the second to last chapter. But for what it is, I think it is pretty well done. It is cohesive. There are clear, like, through lines and themes and all kinds of stuff. It makes sense. But we should talk about it. So, number one, do you remember, I think I said in an earlier chapter, that the whole thing with Bruce and romance, it starts to come across like he's just gay, but you need more context before you can come to that conclusion? This is what I was talking about. So what it is that I think Bruce is aromantic. I think that's the way I wrote it. And for what it is, I think it's pretty well done as a depiction of a person who doesn't have those types of feelings. So that's nice. But yeah, so when you get to this point, it all comes together and it's like, okay, I see what's going on here. And it is nice that he doesn't use the word, but he does basically come right out and say, like, this is not something that I'm going to do, and that's okay. And the story is like, and that is okay. And then the other part of it is the whole, like, I am the Batman sort of bit. I'm torn on this one, because I think in isolation, it's fine that Bruce realizes, like, you know, Batman means more to me than just putting on a costume and being a thing for other people. And that's fine. Because it's like, you do this for this many years, you become attached to all of this, and you start to put more of yourself into it than you would think. Like, it doesn't surprise me that he would start to feel a sort of like ownership over it a little bit. But my problem is the fact that Bruce is like, well, I can't stop. And there's this entire narrative that happens. It comes up in a few chapters, because it happened in one of his Asylum chapters too, where he's like, oh, well, now I know that I was miserable and I thought it was Rachel, but in reality it was because I didn't get to be Batman, so I know better than to not do that anymore. That bothers me, because the thing about it is that if a time comes when Gotham doesn't need a Batman, he does need to step down. This could cause problems. It's very unlikely that Gotham will ever see a time where Batman isn't necessary, no matter which way you kind of come at the situation. But the point is, if that time ever does come, and Bruce is still unwilling to, like, let go of being the Bat, that's problematic. And, like, framing it that way, I think, as, like, I can't stop, this is something I need to do, I think it kind of, like, flies right in the face of like what Alfred said and what Bruce said earlier in the story. Like, if you remember way back in Batman Begins, Alfred told Bruce, like, this can't be personal, it has to be bigger than that. And then Bruce came back and said basically the same thing, like, weren't you the one that told me that this can't be personal? And that's still true. And it's like, but what he means is when it's personal is that you can't do this for your own gratification, it has to be for other people, even if it does mean something to you. Like, and this is kind of the thing, it's like reading this in the aftermath of having written Speak of the Devil and then comparing and contrasting the two heroes from each other, even if you ignore the politics, because that's purely a product of the fact that I wrote this a lot earlier than I wrote Speak of the Devil. Like, if the time came when New York finally, like, if all of the police, not even police corruption, but like if the police were dismantled and there was better, I don't know if it should be law enforcement, but just better like systems in place, that people were treated fairly, Matt would retire. Like, he's not doing this just because he wants to be Daredevil. He's doing this because he needs to help the people of Hell's Kitchen, you know? And that's where I think it becomes problematic with the Bruce Wayne framing it as something that it's like, I need to do because it makes me feel better, is exactly the type of personal that Alfred was saying, don't let it become like that, you know? But like I said, if you don't look at it that deeply, it is fine. I don't have a problem with him becoming attached to being Batman because, again, he's been doing this he did it for like 2 years straight, and he had been like living in that mindset for like 6 years, I think, at this point. So it's not that weird that he would just be like, you know, I feel like I should be out there doing something, and like, even if it does make me feel better, I feel like it actually is helpful, that kind of thing. But when you frame it as like, well, I have to do this because this is just something that I need to do, it is part of me personally, and it makes me feel whole. What? No, you do not, you don't. That is sirens going off. That's exactly what you shouldn't be doing. So, like, I feel like this arc kind of, like, it hits the point and then it, like, goes right. It's kind of skips past it and it's like, no, come back, you know? Like, I almost had it. It's so funny. I have gone so back and forth on whether this arc in particular, because before I had reread the series in depth, so this is way back in the time of fanfic live tweets. My first fanfic live tweet of the series was just me reading for funsies, so I didn't really absorb a lot of the stuff that happened, and like I barely read the back half of The Dark Knight Rises because I was so like secondhand embarrassed about it. So when I came back to actually do the in-depth live tweets, I was so certain that the point I was trying to make with my story was the complete polar opposite of what Christopher Nolan was saying. Only to realize when I read The Dark Knight Rises that I was saying, like, Christopher Nolan is right, but also this, you know? And I've kind of gone back and forth on whether I actually was, like, saying the same thing as him or going against it. And I'm kind of seeing why I thought I was saying what I did, like, back in 2007 or 16 when I did this, because of that point where it goes past, like, well, Batman is just something that I like to do, you know, and I think it's helpful, to this is something that I need to do because it helps me. And it's like, I don't know. I don't know. So anyway, we can get one more chapter in for this episode. So I think this is Barsad. I'm not entirely sure. But anyway, let's go to the next chapter. He's going to move tonight. You so sure? Selena said to him. He told me tomorrow. Barsad looked up from his plate. Why tomorrow? He asked her. She shrugged. I don't know. That's just what he told me. That was odd. He was sure the Batman would come while the moon was still full. It would be to his advantage if he did. So this is a Barsad chapter. It's funny, so many people keep saying, like, no, you need to act during the full moon, you know, you have an advantage. But it speaks to Bruce's dislike of wanting to kill people, that he was just trying to be careful. Maybe he meant midnight, Jen said after swallowing her food. That's tomorrow, technically. Selena shrugged again. Maybe. They ate their dinner in the living room with him instead of in the kitchen or in their room. He didn't mind the company a bit. They dined by the waning light of the sun streaming through the window, cracked to let in the warm breeze. By the time they finished, the room had fallen dark, though the sky was the glowing pale blue color of sunset. I don't know if that really counts as sunset. If it's blue, isn't the sun already down? Color of dusk, that's a word that exists. It doesn't matter. Dude, Jen started. Where's your blood? Dude, where's my car? I already fed. He'd had a meager cup of fish blood earlier that morning. We don't usually feed while we eat. Selena, who'd been fidgeting uncomfortably in her seat during the exchange, got up and turned on the light in the hallway so that it would light the room somewhat through the doorway. This house didn't have lights in the living room? That's really weird. What is up with you and the dark? Jen said as she returned. It's not the dark, she said as she lowered herself into the chair. It's this place. The house, the Narrows, all of it. It's the memories more than anything, I guess. Jen nodded. This place was fucked up before the Batman came along. You couldn't even go outside after the sun went down. She looked up at him. Well, we couldn't. That's why we had come here. He had enough of those people who would push others down because they weren't men or whatever else. That's a luxury you all have, to get that upset over what other men do to us. I've been through too much to get that mad about it anymore. I'm not going to sit back and take that shit, but I'm not going to kill anybody over it. You can't get anything done like that. Prasad nodded. That was something he'd come to understand before he left. Even without all that, though, this place is still creepy as hell. She looked out the window. I wish the pronoun game wasn't happening right now because there are 2 women in this scene, and I'd like to know which one is speaking at any given time. And it looks like a goddamn horror movie. I don't know about that, he said. The buildings are literally falling apart. Hell, I was surprised that this place even had a roof considering the rest of the street. I don't know, he repeated again. So before we go on, I wanted to talk about what Selena just said about that's a luxury you all have. So this was something that I put in because it was something that was relevant at the time to me and my friends. This idea that, like, while people who are oppressed get angry about their oppression, the way they get angry about it is very different from people who don't experience that oppression but want to ally themselves with people who do. And I think this is actually a somewhat good commentary on that entire thing. I think a lot about a friend that I used to be mutuals with on Tumblr who was white would get very, very worked up about like racism in like Game of Thrones and stuff, while I, a person who actually experiences racism when I watch Game of Thrones, I'm just like, this is not, like, it's bad. What is happening is bad, but I don't get worked up about it because I'm so used to racism in media in general that it's not that it doesn't bother me, but it's just that I don't care. And that's what Selena is sort of saying there, that yes, she is not like okay with what's happening to her. She's upset about it, but the type of upset she is not the same type of upset that someone like Bane feels about these things. So in particular, what she's talking about here, of course, is sexism, because that's the one axis of oppression that Bane doesn't, well, possibly, but the one axis of oppression that she experiences that he doesn't. So the idea that like killing people for being misogynist to her is just like, okay, that's a bit much, but to like Bane and to Barsad, at least at a time, it made sense. I was going to say the other axis of oppression is anti-blackness, but I can't remember if Bane was black in this or not. That might have been a later development. So that might be another one, though they both experience racism. Racism for people of different races is not the same. But yeah, so I think what she's saying here is kind of like relevant, but to a point, it kind of misses the fact that Bane is also oppressed by the same people. He may not live in Gotham City, but again, Bane in this is not white. He is not rich. Like, he is poorer probably than Selena is, but the point is that they're both like poor. And like, that means that the two, and he's disabled. So he's definitely like, these systems do affect him as well, even though he does not live there. So his reaction isn't purely one of an ally who's just overzealous. He is just reacting in a different way than she would. She has a point, but I feel like her point kind of ignores some things about Bane that are pretty important too. But anyway, let's keep going. I don't know, he repeated again. There was a time when I was little when Bane wasn't getting any work, so he went back to his home. It's not where he's from originally, but it's where he went after he climbed from the pit. They both gave him a look. Another story for another day. We still moved around a lot when we went there, and there was a time when we lived in an old temple in the middle of the rainforest. He didn't want to sleep because he was afraid I was going to get eaten or something. He chuckled. I used to think he was overreacting, but looking back, he probably wasn't, considering what's out there. And what's out there? Jen asked. Do you want to sleep tonight? Selena raised an eyebrow. Don't do that, man, Jen said to him. He smiled. He was only half joking. Oh, Jesus Christ. What's funny is that another day for another storyline actually reminds me of a line from Star Wars The Force Awakens, when I think Han Solo asks Maz Kanata how she got Anakin's lightsaber when Luke had lost it in Cloud City, and she's just like, another story for another day, and then they never follow up on that ever. And the "what's out there, do you want to sleep tonight" line actually reminds me of a line from Speak of the Devil in the first episode of season 2, when Foggy is like, oh, I don't know about this whole Daredevil thing, and then Matt tells that kind of like really harrowing story about the lady who came to them because her husband was abusing them, and then they directed her to a woman's shelter. Her husband found out, and then he was literally going to like knife her to death, like chop her into pieces at the bus stop, but Matt stopped him. And then Foggy's like, why didn't you tell me about that? Because, you know, it was literally one of their clients at their law firm, and Matt's like, one of us needs to be able to sleep at night, you know. But anyway, they all looked up at the sound of a knock on the door. Selena was the one who answered it. Hey, John said as she walked into the house. Why are y'all sitting in here in the dark? Telling ghost stories, Barsad said. Jen threw a pillow at him. Jesus, I love how obvious it is that Jen and Barsad are both like kids. Well, if y'all are done spooking each other, Gordon wants to go uptown. He thinks the Batman is going to move tonight. You guys in? Selena looked from John back to Barsad. All right, I'll go. Jen got up too, but Barsad hesitated. He was still wary about showing his face where they could see him, where Bane could see him. I forgot for a minute that Barsad is the POV character of this chapter. John looked at him. You know you can't hide from him forever, right? I know, he said. It had been a month. He didn't have to keep himself hidden like this anymore. Bane was going to find out eventually, if he didn't already know. He got to his feet. The streets were crowded, but much calmer than he remembered. They kept themselves to the shadowy alleyways so it would stay that way. Where's he gonna go? Jen asked them. He might be anywhere, Gordon told her. He might be anywhere, Gordon. I don't remember my Gordon voice already. Gordon told her. Bane's got himself holed up in City Hall. I don't see why he wouldn't go there, Foley said. He's got his whole army with him, Barsad told him. Batman wouldn't take them all on his own. There are too many. Jen turned to Gordon. You and him took on the whole asylum, just the two of you. And there's a difference between mental patients and cops high on hallucinogens and trained mercenaries in their right of mind. And besides, if it wasn't for him and Rachel Dawes, I would have been one of them. Okay, we'd still got almost 3,000 cops underground, John reminded them. He's not one for the direct approach. We're not going to be storming the steps of City Hall. He, being Barsad, went to the end of the alley and poked his head around the corner. Even in a city this metropolitan, the darkness was ever present. Lights stood on both sides of the street, but its center was still dim. The Gotham Bridge stood at the end of the road, a dark silhouette against the glowing night sky, except for... Holy shit. He knew they were all looking at him. What is it, kid? Foley asked him. He didn't turn. He couldn't take his eyes off it. What the hell are you? Selena had started as she walked toward him. Her eyes widened as well. Holy shit, she echoed. Oh, Jesus. They all came then, and people on the street were stopping too. On top of the bridge's stone supports was a symbol, painted in flame. The bat shone bright orange in the dark. Foley was the third to say it. Holy shit. And that's the end of that chapter. Find it very hard to believe that a stone bridge would lead from mainland New Jersey to Gotham City, but we're gonna cruise right by that and say that that chapter had good parts. It was all right. I think the part when they were in the house and they were talking about all this stuff, I think was interesting, even given like the problems and stuff. I think any chapter where we get to learn a little bit more about Barsad's backstory has the potential to be good, even if it isn't. I love how they're just like creeping around in the alleys uptown. And then that little comment about like, oh, the streetlights stood on both sides of the street, but its center was still dim. All of the stuff that I say, that's mostly for the mood, I think. But again, having spent just, 3 years going to college in a large city, that's not how it was. Just to give a small anecdote, for a while, I was always afraid to stay in the city past sundown because I'm like, oh, it's going to be dark. I'm scared. It's going to be like, there's not going to be any lights anywhere. Oh God, oh God. But when I would leave school, I would have to walk pretty far to get to the bus stop to take the bus back to New Jersey. So I would have to walk almost all the way up the Parkway and then down Cherry Street to Broad Street from 20th Street to get on my bus and go home, no matter like whatever time of day it was. And I think very recently I had a class that ended at 6:30, and of course the spring semester begins during the winter. This also might have happened during that class that ended at like 4 something that I had the previous semester too, but during the winter either way. And I actually did walk for the first time, and I walked down the street and like it is completely brightly lit. Like, number one, it's the fucking Parkway in Philadelphia, so it's not gonna be. So this idea that, like, maybe that could be true of, like, streets in the suburbs or something like that, but in the middle of, like, the central Gotham City, that's not gonna be a thing. But anyway, enough about things that I thought I was being clever about but wasn't. Anyway, like I said, that chapter is pretty, it's like, it's all right. It has good moments. I love that the chapter lampshades me taking inspiration from horror movies for the setting. Like, there was just some interesting stuff in this chapter, but the writing style, like, again, it has the same, like, issues that all the other chapters have had so far. But this one was especially confusing with the pronoun game, so, hey. So, next one, I think we open on another John chapter, and I think this is John's last chapter. So I will see you for that. If you like this video, like it on the YouTubes, and subscribe to my channel, and watch other videos. And like I said, I will see you next episode. Bye!